Welcome to another deep dive. We get a lot of requests to explore all sorts of topics, and today's is one that I think we all can relate to, whether we realize it or not. It's the science behind those things that we do day in and day out, almost without thinking. Habits.
Absolutely, habits. And we're going to dig into the book that so many of you suggested, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. It's a fascinating look at how these patterns work, why they're so ingrained, and how we can actually change them.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. How many times have you gone through your morning routine, driven to work, or even brushed your teeth without really thinking about it? Those are habits in action, and they have a much bigger impact on our lives than we often realize.
The book really breaks down the nuts and bolts of how these habits form and how they work, and the core of it is this idea of the habit loop.
Okay, so the habit loop, it's like this cycle, right?
Yeah, think of it as a three-part
Mhm.
process. There's a cue, then a routine, and finally a reward.
So like an alarm clock going off, that could be a cue.
Exactly. That alarm clock is your cue to get out of bed. The routine is the actual process of getting up, making coffee, showering, whatever your morning looks like. And then the reward. Maybe it's that first sip of coffee, feeling refreshed after a shower, or just the satisfaction of starting your day.
So the reward is that thing that makes your brain go, okay, that felt good, let's do that again.
You got it. And that feeling, that sense of reward, is what reinforces the connection between the cue and the routine. Over time, it becomes automatic. The brain essentially creates a shortcut, bypassing the need for conscious thought.
And the book really drives this point home with the story of Eugene Pauly, which honestly is one of the most compelling parts of the book. Eugene, as you mentioned earlier, suffered from some pretty severe brain damage that affected his memory.
Yeah, the specific area that was damaged was the hippocampus, which is crucial for forming new memories. So Eugene couldn't really remember new information or events.
But what's so amazing is that even with this memory loss, he could still perform certain routines without even thinking about it.
Exactly. Like he could still navigate his way around his house, make breakfast, even go for walks in his neighborhood, all things he had done countless times before.
But if you asked him how he knew where to go or what he was doing, he couldn't tell you. It was like his body remembered, even though his mind didn't.
Precisely. And this is where the research on Eugene gets really interesting. They did this experiment with him involving a maze, which honestly sounds like something out of a movie.
A maze. Okay, tell me more.
So they set up this maze in Eugene's house, and at the end of the maze, they put in a bowl of chocolate pudding. You see, Eugene absolutely loved chocolate pudding.
Who doesn't love chocolate pudding, right?
True. So they had Eugene go through the maze, and of course, the first few times he was kind of lost, bumping into walls. But what's incredible is that over time, even though he couldn't remember ever being in the maze before, he got faster and faster at finding his way to that pudding.
So he was learning, but without any conscious awareness that he was learning.
Exactly. And what this research on Eugene, starting way back in 1993, really highlights is that the part of the brain responsible for these habits, the basal ganglia, is different from the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory.
Oh, so that's how he could still do these routines even though his memory was impaired. His basal ganglia were still intact.
Exactly. So while the hippocampus remembers what happened, the basal ganglia remember how to do things, especially when those things become habits. It's like your brain's autopilot system.
So all those things we do every day without thinking, driving to work, making coffee, brushing our teeth, they're all being controlled by our basal ganglia.
That's right. It frees up our conscious mind to focus on other things. And this research on the basal ganglia and habits really picked up steam in the 1990s, especially at MIT's Brain and Cognitive Sciences Department.
What were they doing at MIT?
Well, they were doing all sorts of studies, but one of the most interesting ones involved rats running through mazes, kind of like with Eugene.
Ah, okay, I see where you're going with this. Rats and mazes classic science experiment. So what did
Yeah.
they find?
What they observed was that when the rats were first learning the maze, there was a lot of activity in different parts of their brains, especially the areas involved in thinking, planning, and decision-making.
Makes sense. They were trying to figure out the maze.
Right. But as the rats ran the maze over and over again and the route became more familiar, something interesting happened. The brain activity started to decrease, particularly in those areas involved in conscious thought, and it became concentrated in the basal ganglia.
Oh, so as the rats developed a habit of running the maze, their brains basically went on autopilot.
Exactly. And this is what happens with us, too. As we repeat a behavior over and over, it requires less and less conscious effort. The basal ganglia take over, allowing other parts of the brain to kind of go to sleep. Think of it like learning a new dance routine. At first, you have to consciously think about each step, but with practice, those steps become automatic, and you could do the whole routine without thinking.
And the basal ganglia, this is like a really old part of the brain, right?
Yeah, it's evolutionarily ancient, connected to the brainstem, which controls basic functions like breathing and heart rate.
Yeah.
So this ability to form habits is a very fundamental primal mechanism. It's like our brain's way of becoming more efficient.
So it's like once our brains figure out a good way to do something, they automate it, freeing up mental resources for other tasks.
Precisely. Now, here's the thing about habits. They're not just about routines. They're also driven by this powerful neurological craving.
Craving, like craving chocolate or something.
Well, it could be craving chocolate, but it's more about the anticipation of a reward. Remember the habit loop. The reward at the end of the loop doesn't just reinforce the habit. It creates a craving for that reward the next time the cue appears.
So it's like my alarm goes off, that's my cue, and my brain starts anticipating that delicious first sip of coffee, which makes me want to get out of bed and start my routine.
Precisely. It's like your brain is saying, hey, remember that good feeling you get when you drink coffee? Let's do that again.
And this craving is what really drives us to repeat the behavior, even if the actual reward itself isn't that big of a deal.
Absolutely. And the book has this great example from the early 1900s about Schlitz beer.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that. What was it about again?
Well, back then, Schlitz wasn't doing so well. Their beer wasn't anything special, and they were struggling to compete with other brands. But then they came up with this brilliant marketing campaign.
Did they change their recipe or something?
Nope, the beer itself stayed the same. What they changed was how they talked about it. They started emphasizing the meticulous process of brewing Schlitz beer.
Like what kind of process?
Oh, they talked about the purity of their water, how they carefully selected their ingredients, how they cleaned their equipment, all these things that were largely invisible to the average consumer.
So they were highlighting the routine, making it seem special, even though the beer itself wasn't any different.
Exactly. And it worked. People started associating Schlitz with this idea of purity and quality, even though it was all just clever marketing.
So the cue was seeing a Schlitz ad, and the reward was this perceived sense of drinking a higher quality beer, which created a craving to buy Schlitz.
You got it. And it highlights how much our brains are influenced by cues and rewards, even when we don't consciously realize it. It makes you think about all the cues and rewards that shape our daily habits, from the things we buy to the food we eat to the way we interact with others.
It's like we're all walking around responding to these invisible triggers. So how do we break free from those habits we want to change?
Well, that brings us to the golden rule of habit change.
Okay, let's hear it. What's the golden rule?
The golden rule states that you can't eliminate a habit, you can only replace it. So you keep the cue and the reward, but you change the routine in between.
So it's not about trying to stop doing something completely. It's about finding a new way to satisfy that craving when the cue appears.
Exactly. And the first step is to really understand your habit loop. You need to identify the cue that triggers the habit and the reward that you're seeking. Then you can start brainstorming alternative routines that will deliver a similar reward.
The book gives the example of Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA, which really illustrates this principle well.
AA, right? They provide people struggling with alcohol addiction with a new set of routines to replace the habit of drinking.
Like going to meetings, sharing their stories, and having a sponsor.
Exactly. And these new routines provide a different way to cope with the same triggers and cravings that previously led to drinking. And that element of belief, of feeling supported by a community, acts as a powerful reward in itself, helping those new habits stick.
So it's not just about changing the behavior, it's also about changing the underlying beliefs and finding new sources of support.
Absolutely. And the book also mentions some research by Wendy Wood at Duke University, which suggests that almost 45% of our daily choices are actually habits.
Wow, that's almost half of everything we do. So yeah, understanding how these habits work and how to change them is super important.
It is. And speaking of changing habits, the book introduces this fascinating concept called keystone habits.
Keystone habits. Okay, now I'm intrigued. What makes a habit a keystone?
Keystone habits are those habits that, when changed, set off a chain reaction, influencing other areas of your life. They have this ripple effect.
It's like if you change one key habit, it can lead to all sorts of other positive changes that you didn't even expect.
Exactly. And the book gives this great example of Paul O'Neill, the former CEO of Alcoa, a big aluminum company.
Yeah.
When he took over, Alcoa wasn't doing so well.
What did he do?
Well, instead of focusing on traditional business goals like profits or efficiency, O'Neill focused on one thing: worker safety. He made it his top priority to create the safest workplace in the world.
And I bet that had a ripple effect on everything else.
You bet it did. By focusing on safety, O'Neill inadvertently triggered improvements in efficiency, quality, and ultimately, profits.
Because if you're focusing on safety, you have to improve communication, problem solving, and attention to detail, which all benefit the company as a whole.
Precisely. It's a powerful example of how one keystone habit can transform an entire organization. And for individuals, keystone habits could be things like starting a regular exercise routine, keeping a food journal, or even making your bed every morning.
And these things can have a positive impact on other areas of your life. Like if you start exercising regularly, you might start eating healthier, sleeping better, and having more energy.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. So finding those keystone habits and focusing on changing them can be a really effective way to improve your life overall.
It makes you think about what those key habits in your own life might be. Okay, so we've talked about the habit loop, cues, rewards, the basal ganglia, and keystone habits. What else does the book delve into?
Well, it also talks about willpower and how it's not just this innate quality, but a skill that you can actually strengthen, like a muscle.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that analogy before. Willpower as a muscle.
Yeah.
So, how do we exercise our willpower?
Well, the book highlights research showing that willpower can be depleted. Like, if you have to resist temptation all day long, you're more likely to give in later on.
Like our willpower gets tired.
Exactly. But the good news is that we can also train our willpower to become stronger
So, how do we do that?
by practicing it, of course. And the book suggests a few strategies, like planning ahead to avoid tempting situations, creating routines to reduce decision fatigue, and removing temptations from your environment.
So, like if you're trying to eat healthier, don't keep junk food in the house.
Exactly. Make it easier on yourself by removing the temptation altogether. And the more you practice resisting temptation, the stronger your willpower becomes.
It's like going to the gym for your mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And building up that willpower muscle can make it much easier to stick to those new habits you're trying to create. Now, so far, we've mostly talked about habits at an individual level, but the book also explores how habits operate in organizations and societies.
Oh, yeah, I'm curious about that. How do habits influence groups of people?
Well, the book gives the example of Providence Hospital, which had a serious problem with infections spreading among patients.
Oh, wow, that's a big issue.
It was. And they tried all sorts of things to improve hand washing among healthcare workers, but nothing seemed to stick. Then they brought in a doctor who understood the power of habit.
What did this doctor do?
Well, he realized that they needed to create a new habit loop for hand washing. So he identified the cue, seeing a patient's door, and the feeling of having clean hands.
Hmm.
And then he created a simple routine. Before entering a patient's room, everyone had to wash their hands.
And did it work?
It did. By making it a consistent routine, hand washing became automatic, and infection rates went down dramatically.
Yeah.
It's a great example of how understanding habit loops can be used to improve safety and health on a larger scale.
It's like once it becomes a habit, people don't even have to think about it anymore. They just do it.
Exactly. And the book also touches on this idea of social habits, which are the unspoken rules and routines that govern how we behave in groups.
Like how we greet each other, how we wait in line, how we conduct meetings.
Exactly. These social habits shape our behavior in subtle but powerful ways.
It makes you think about all the social habits that we follow without even realizing it. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Anything else from the book that really stood out to you?
Well, it circles back to this idea of belief being crucial for habit change, especially in Chapter 9. Remember the example of AA?
Yeah, they provide those new routines for people struggling with addiction.
Right, but the book emphasizes that for those new routines to stick, people need to believe that change is possible. They need to have faith in the process and in themselves.
So it's not enough to just change the behavior, you also need to change your mindset.
Exactly. And that belief can come from different places: social support, seeing others succeed, or even just having a deep conviction that you deserve a better life.
So it's like, if you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be much harder to change those ingrained habits.
Absolutely. And the book leaves us with a lot to think about. We've explored this fascinating world of habits: the habit loop, the basal ganglia, cues, rewards, keystone habits, willpower, and the importance of belief.
It's really given us a new perspective on those things we do automatically every day, both good and bad.
And the key takeaway is that we're not slaves to our habits. We have the power to understand them, change them, and ultimately shape our own lives.
Absolutely. So here's a challenge for you, our listeners. Think about one small habit loop in your own life that you're now curious to examine more closely. What's the cue, the routine, and the reward, and what might happen if you experiment with just one part of that loop?
Become a detective of your own habits and see what you discover. You might be surprised by what you find.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the power of habit. We'll see you next time.